Thank you. Hi, I'm Dr. Simone Stumpf. Thank you for the UXPA UK for inviting me. Thank you for to Facebook for hosting me. So before I start, I have two things to say. So I first want to tell you how this talk came about, because Paul Coombs has been actually chasing me for about 3 years to give a talk here. And at one point he was like, come and talk, come and talk. And what about, like, you know, what you going to talk about? And I said, how about I give a talk about how UX designers are going to become obsolete for, you know, in the future. And he said, like, yeah, talk about that. Admittedly, it was at the Christmas do of the UXPA. But finally, I think the opportunity is here for me to go, actually, possibly you're becoming obsolete in the next few years. And the other thing, the other admission is that I'm an academic, so these slides will be very, very boring, right? So that's the health warning. Just a little bit about me. So I'm currently the co-director for the Centre for HCI Design at City University of London. Sorry, I had to insert that "of" there. Steph Wilson, who's in the audience somewhere, I can't see her at the moment. She's the other co-director of the centre. She's there, waving. Woo, she gets applause. That's great. A little bit about me, what I've been doing, my research. I've done research in what I'm going to talk about, which is when machines talk back and the sort of rise of artificial intelligence. So I actually did some work years ago at UCL, where I was looking at how you can detect theft by employees through data analysis. So that used some machine learning, some artificial intelligence. Also, when I was at Oregon State University in the States, I did some work about presenting the right resources to knowledge workers, like people like you and me, looking for information, right resources at the right time. Right? So actually, since 2005, I've been looking at how end users, so people who have no background in artificial intelligence at all, how they could actually interact with AI and how that, you know, how they could do that. And really, what I am really interested in is, well, how can we actually leverage all of that human knowledge that everyone has to ramp up what AI does, right? So that is sort of the area of interactive machine learning. I'm also very interested in how can we get these machines to actually explain what they're doing, right? So you can understand why they're doing what they're doing. And really following on from that, I'm really interested in how interacting with AI affects trust and user experience. Right. Okay, when people think about AI, that is what they think the future holds of that. That's the future of AI. That's the UI you will be interacting with in the future, right? It's either HAL, who will sort of lock you out of the spaceship and you're going to slowly die, or it is Arnie or the Terminator chasing after you and you will slowly die. Interestingly, they share the same eye, and I don't know if that's a feature of AI, but that is what people think about, right? They are going to interact with this being that has its own mind, right? And it is not quite comfortable, right? It's something alien. It's something kind of bad that is going to replace you. But actually, AI is already here. It's not looking like Terminator or HAL. In fact, what it's looking like is Gmail priority inbox, some kind of algorithm that selects ads for you, the recommendations that you get on Netflix, the Nest interface that the Nest system that learns when you're in or out, when you want your heating switched on or not, or a security system that recognizes you and lets you in, but nobody else, or a self-driving car that hopefully doesn't crash into a lorry that's going sideways. So AI is starting to be everywhere, and it is going to be, and it is already mainstream. So what does that mean actually for end users, for users like you and me interacting with AI, but also us as UX designers or even UX researchers? Well, let me tell you a little bit about artificial intelligence. So, if you don't know what artificial intelligence is, it's based on some complex data analysis, right? And usually you have a process in place that analyzes that data, that processes that data to predict something and make a decision based on it. It might involve some sensors to acquire that data that it makes decisions on, and possibly some actuators, so something, some tools, something in the real world that actually makes changes, right? For the Nest, for example, there's a sensor that measures the temperature, right? It has a sort of complex data analysis process, and then the actuator actually means it turns the heating on and off. Most artificial intelligence has some autonomy. That means it makes some decisions by itself, right? It certainly reasons by itself without any human input. What that means is, and that's where the little cute rabbit comes in, it's kind of black magic to users. Users don't understand how it works, right? There's sort of some data going in, something else happens at the end. The rest is sort of like a magician pulling a rabbit out of his hat. The danger with that is that UX design becomes edged out, right? Because it's doing all of this clever stuff, right, that some data scientist, some engineer is cooking up, and UX almost doesn't get a look in. Right? It's going back to the good old days where, developers built the system, and then at the end, the UX designer came in, put a nice interface on top, and Bob's your uncle. Right? That is probably not the way you want, because what you want to do is make these UX considerations, how people interact with these systems, really early on. So, I gave you a little bit of flavor of what AI is. Now, what does it look like? And there's a real spectrum of AI. So on one hand, you have the black boxes, the computers, right, that might display some information to you, right? You might have a conversational agent, an avatar, that actually mimics a human being and interacts like you, like a human being, but via a screen. And we've also already seen some sort of avatar representation in the previous talk. Or it could actually be robots, either humanoid or not so humanoid, but something that actually has a sort of physical representation in the world. Right? Now, my favorite saying at the moment is, if AI is going to kill you right now, it's not going to look like Terminator, right? It's going to look like this black box on this end, right? It's probably going to be a decision support system that makes a diagnosis on your health status, and it might get it wrong. It might be a tool that spits out some decision that affects you in real life. Just recently, a decision support system using artificial intelligence and machine learning was in the news. So it actually helps judges make sentencing decisions, right? And it did that on complex data analysis, and people are wondering, well, is it actually getting it right, or is it biased? And chances are, actually, it is, but you can't prove it. So the main things I want to talk about today is that there are several issues with designing and actually considering the UX with artificial intelligence systems. And those are that we assume that it works like traditional AI that we all sort of kind of think AI is about, and that it is something like rules that this machine follows. I'm also going to talk about how direct manipulation and direct control is violated, one of the basic principles of HCI and interface design, that we're losing transparency of these systems, and also how they might violate or how they're not consider social cues or social norms. So let's go through. Usually what is happening is that there are many buzzwords nowadays that are applied to artificial intelligence. You might have heard machine learning, cognitive computing, deep learning, agents, that kind of stuff. And many people think that it is following rules. But actually, they are not rules at all. It is based on this complex data analysis. It's based on advanced statistics, right? It's based on complex maths. And we know that users are really bad at maths and statistics. I'm bad at maths and statistics, right? And so not only are users bad at maths and statistics, but designers are bad at maths and statistics. But what does that mean, right? Usually, as designers, we understand our raw material really, really well, right? We know how a web page is built. We know how an Oculus Rift works, right? We investigate how they work. But in this particular instance, it's really, really hard to get that across, right? So what I'm trying to demonstrate with this graph is, and it's sort of like the good old Don Norman kind of model of, as a designer, you have your mental model, and you're trying to communicate that model to the user to kind of get them to see what the system is doing from the designer's point of view, right? The danger, though, is that your model of how it works is just as bad as the user's kind of model. So you as UX designers, you as UX researchers, really need to understand your raw material. In this case, how artificial intelligence works. Otherwise, you cannot successfully design for it. Secondly, there's also the issue that with AI systems where you have some autonomy, you're actually losing this principle of being able to directly manipulate or control what the interface, what the system is doing. Right? In a traditional system, you click a button and you know what's going to happen. Well, hopefully you know what is going to happen. You have that direct mapping between an action and a result, right? So with an AI system, hopefully, that is going to happen. And it's fine if the system works okay, right? But what we also know is the less control you have, the less trust you have in that. So there's an element of risk creeping in that the system might get it wrong because you don't have that direct control on it, and that influences trust. And also, it's really important to consider that usually the control that you have is mixed initiative. You're swapping control between the system back and forth, and you also need to really consider how that collaboration between those between a human and a machine works. And you really need to consider that eventually this interaction will fail. The system will make mistakes, right? It's never going to be 100% accurate. And you need to build in this collaboration, this dialogue to actually handle these errors and be aware of trust and hopefully increase trust or regain trust or renew trust. Transparency. So another thing that artificial intelligence systems violate. So I put this maths up there, these two formulae, and actually it's one of the most basic artificial intelligence or machine learning approaches that is currently used. It's a naive Bayes. How many people are glancing at it and going, right, Monica, yes. Hands up, who can actually understand this? Oh, well done, right? Woohoo! So it's actually, you know, if you give it to somebody who is well-versed in maths, if you give it to, well, even a sort of average developer would kind of going, ooh, it'll take me a while. Probably if you know some stats, you can figure it out. But it's actually, to somebody from a machine learning background, it is really fairly simple, isn't it? Right? So to an average end user, it's not so simple. Even to a UX designer, it's probably not so simple, right? To me, when I first sort of came across it, we spent, I think, 3 weeks in a room going, now tell me again, how does it work, right? And so what you're actually expecting users to do is understand this complex math. And they can't, right? So what you have to kind of figure out is, well, how can you explain that in a way that is easy for them to understand? So how can you craft appropriate explanations to perhaps visualize what is going on, right? How this maths actually works, and how to bring across these salient points that AI uses to make decisions, like model accuracy, like how correct is it overall, right? Why is it using that kind of piece of evidence or kind of that kind of piece of data, but not others? It's all in the formula, but you need to communicate that. And then, actually, this fits in really well with Raz's kind of point about social norms. If you've ever been in my inclusive design class, you've seen this. It's one of my favorite examples of AI getting it completely wrong. It's a robot called Pearl. And you can Google it. It's Pearl Assist will get you there. And it shows this social robot in use, right, in a senior citizens facility, right? And actually, that nice lady in the middle is the star of the show. Because she uses Pearl, and Pearl is trying to get her from wherever she is in a corridor at the time, and to an appointment with a physiotherapist, right? And so there is this lovely lady kind of standing there with a Zimmer frame, right? And this robot goes, "Are you so-and-so?" And kind of goes, "Yes, I am. I'm going to take you to the physiotherapist. Follow me." Turns around, goes very slowly. Not the old lady, the robot. The old lady is actually faster than the robot. And then the robot goes, "Follow me, chop, chop." And that just proves the point that actually, this was done by an engineer, because actually, as designers, we are really, really good at figuring out appropriate interactions using norms, right? Using these social norms, which are not built into AI at the moment, right? And that's our opportunity, I think, to kind of go, all right, now we have this knowledge of how people interact with each other. And so what you need is to start building that into the AI. Because ultimately, what we want to do with AI and as a future interface is that we want to have appropriate control, or people actually feel in control, that we want to give them these social cues that are part of everything. We want to increase our trust in these artificial intelligence systems, and hopefully also increase transparency. And I think that UX might have a crucial role to play still in that. So that is my talk.
So you mentioned the example with the judges and like the possible bias of sentencing, and obviously this is a problem with any algorithm that like inherits the biases of its creators. So could you talk a little bit more about that aspect of it?
So I mean, the inherent. So one of the problems with whole of artificial intelligence is that it's really complex data analysis, and the chances of it getting it wrong are really high. And in fact, you will rarely get a artificial intelligence system that gets it 100% right. Right? You always have, even in a good artificial intelligence system, you have probably about 3% error, at least, right? In some systems, you have even more error, right? What happens, though, is that you don't know in which way it's making the error. So if you go up to another human who makes an error, they can at least take you through the reasoning of how it went wrong or how they went wrong, right? A machine can't do that, and I think that is the big issue at the moment with these systems, right? Especially that sentencing system where they think there is an error in there, but they don't actually know where the error is. The company that developed that algorithm is actually not releasing any of the details either. So it's not even a sort of, where you could send a developer in and kind of going, or a data scientist in kind of going, tell me where the problem is. It's all locked down. So an average person can't even understand what they're doing. And I think that is one of the great big challenges, increasing transparency of what these things are doing.
Hello, that was fascinating, thank you. To Did I miss the bit where you were going to explain why we're all the UXers are going to be out of work in 3 years' time?
I think not in 3 years' time, but possibly. I think what I'm trying to sort of say is that a lot of UXers are interested in that, but don't understand what it actually is about, right? And I think, so there's a two-way street there. I think people should start kind of trying to understand what is going on, right? How they actually work. That will take some commitment. But also there is a danger that the engineers are taking over, right? We're going back to these days when systems are released by the expert programmers without any UX involvement. And, you know, that is the danger that I see, that, you know, where UX designers might become not obsolete, but just edged out.
I completely agree with your point there about being kind of edged out. I work in an organisation where we have teams working with kind of recommendation systems and things like that. And as a UX design researcher, I would love to be able to kind of get more involved with that and feel like I can be part of the kind of design process right from the beginning. Where would you recommend kind of starting though? Because you say it's a vast topic, it's really kind of specialist knowledge. There's a lot of tools for people who want to get into coding, to kind of understand their tools in there from design backgrounds. But where would you recommend to really kind of start if you want to get your head into this space?
Whew, that's an interesting question. I think, so I wouldn't recommend cracking open any of the machine learning books because they are really hardcore. However, I think they're more approachable ways of entering. I think recommender systems are actually one of the ways where you can go, okay, that is still fairly understandable, right? There's also books that try and explain how they work without using, you know, the sort of formula, right? Where they're kind of going, okay, this is actually how it works. And there's actually conferences that specialize in that interaction between HCI and artificial intelligence. And those conferences, those publications are actually a good way to start, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to explain how AI works to an HCI researcher, while at the same time kind of not giving up the sort of complexity of that. Conferences like intelligent user interfaces or even recommender systems are good places to start.
I wondered if you had any experience or in terms of research as to how open certain professionals and professions have been in terms of adopting and accepting artificial intelligence, so particularly in healthcare, and as you were saying about some of the judgments and that sort of thing. Yeah,
I think that's a really good question. I think it varies a lot. I think a lot of financial in the financial sector, it is really, really common to use it already. In fact, I don't know if you've seen the sort of recent news that when the pound dipped just at the party conference, the Conservative Party conference, actually part of the reason was not that everybody was like, oh, God, horrible, you know. It was actually an algorithm that analyzed news, and they think that it's sort of like an automatic trading algorithm kind of kicked in and went, oh no, that's bad news. I just sell off my pound, right? So financial services have used a lot of AI already. In fact, you know, fraudulent activity on your card, well, it's not a human looking through all of your records. It's a system, the black box in a corner, that does it. healthcare is coming also up. The thing is that there, the clinician, the GP still wants to have control over it, because at the end of the day, if the system gets it wrong, it's not the system that gets sued or done for malpractice, it's the doctor. But that is also sort of a sector where it's increasingly popular. And then I think any sort of management decisions that can be made is sort of also quite ripe for taking up AI. I think they're also very interested in AI and how it works.
We only have time for one more question, I'm afraid.
Going back to what you were saying about the 3% error rate and also transparency, well, what is being done to create like an ethical plan of how to work with AI within this industry?
Ethics and AI. I think there are starting to be these questions raised. I think, particularly recently, there has been an effort in the United States to kind of go, well, we actually need to consider what the ethics are around AI and using AI, right? Who would get the blame if it goes wrong, right? So if one of the self-driving cars causes a major car crash, who's actually to blame? Is it the developer of the system? Is it the driver? Who gets that? And I think it's starting to be put in place, but slowly. I think just about now are sort of like these questions are being raised, and sort of like an ethical framework is being put in place.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Okay.
That was great. Thank you.